Thanks for joining us. I'm Marlon Bowling, and this morning, before we even got into our daytime session, we had all kinds of news from USDA, and it was all related to our export business that we have had not only last week, but also overnight, and it was quite eventful. Let's take a look at the weekly export sales numbers in case you missed them earlier this morning in the broadcast. We had the corn coming in with a pretty stout 1.64 million tons of corn that was sold just this last week. Now, remember, that doesn't even include the last couple batches that we had here. Remember, we had one just early this week of 1.7 something million tons. And then we also had a sale yesterday of some corn as well. That won't even factor into this yet. Soybeans were 1.08 million tons last week, and there again, we had a big sale this morning of some soybeans. The wheat, 764,400 tons last week, and that was a marketing year high from what I understand. That was up quite a bit from what we had the week before and 77% higher than the 4-week average. Those overnight sales I was talking about, what we had was 2 sales of soybeans, and one was to China. It was 522,000 tons, and we had another sale for unknown destinations. Never know who that'll end up being. A lot of times it's China, but we don't know. 351,000 tons on that particular purchase. So we're over 870,000 tons sold overnight of U.S. soybeans. Let's see how the trade is shaping up right now. Let's go to the board. And with the quotes provided by bar chart, let's look at corn first, where we have the September contract now 6 higher at 332.25. December up 5 3/4. Soybean trade, we have the nearby contract, the August up 8 1/4 at 894.5, and November 9 1/4 higher at 892. On the wheat market today in Chicago, we have that September contract now 13 1/4 lower at 537.5. That's 14 cents off our earlier high from last night. Wow, what a turnaround there after big gains yesterday. On the hard red winter wheat today, we have September down 12.5 at 447, and spring wheat on Minneapolis wheat, that is, September down 10 3/4 at 517. Brian Hoops joins us now from Midwest Market Solutions. Wow, who let the air out of that wheat balloon this morning?
Yeah, what an ugly turnaround in that wheat, Marlon. Good morning. It had a marking year high for exports this morning, so some good news, but it certainly looks like kind of a buy the rumor yesterday. There were some rumors about China buying U.S. soft red wheat and maybe some rumors of strong export business. And then we've really turned things around today as we're seeing a lot of spread trade with corn, the beneficiary of that spread against profit-taking and unwinding of the spreads against the wheat market.
So that has been taking place for a fair amount of time, from what I understand.
Yeah, it certainly has, and certainly given a pop in the corn market today, which really isn't all that justified. No real export business to speak of, and some really good rains across some of the drier areas of the Midwest yesterday. Then you look at the forecast, and you've got just ideal pollinating type weather for most of the upper Midwest, 70s and 80s for highs early part of next week. You just really couldn't ask for much more than that. And so you have to think the yield potential is increasing at this time rather than decreasing for the corn market.
And a lot of times crude oil will come into play through its tie with ethanol, and crude oil has been higher and lower today. Right now it's down 21 cents at $40.99 per barrel on the August contract. We will come back and talk more with Brian Hoops about what's going on in our livestock trade when we return after this. Our guest is Brian Hoops. Now, he is the president of Midwest Market Solutions, and he's based in Springfield, Missouri. At least that's the home office. Brian, you have locations in several states throughout the plains and the western half of the Corn Belt, correct?
Yeah, we have about 10 offices around the upper Midwest, and a lot of them are in some really good grain growing areas in Omaha, Nebraska, Pocahontas, Iowa, Yankton, South Dakota. So they've all received some really good rains here recently, reporting high potential crop yields for both the corn and soybean markets.
Well, let's look at our livestock trade here. I wanted to visit with you about that because you were just talking about the fact that pollination weather is just almost ideal now for the corn. So maybe that's going to take the heat off of that market here, pardon the pun, for a little while. But even though it is higher today with some support of the unwinding of spreads you were talking about with the wheat, but the cattle is trading higher. And I just wondered if the cattle complex is anticipating weaker corn prices moving forward. We have August live cattle 57 higher at 101.87. October is now $1 higher. The biggest gain is December, up $1.20. On the feeder cattle market, now this you would think would be more closely tied to the corn. August up $1.82 at 141.25 per hundred, and you have September 205 higher now at 141.60. In my mind, Brian, that tells me that they must be thinking corn is going lower. Is there more behind this?
I think that's what a lot of people are anticipating. Corn is eventually going to turn back lower. I think it certainly will after a little bit of a recovery here, and that lower prices should equate to higher feeder cattle. But boy, demand is just red hot for feeder calves right now, and cash cattle has been pretty strong, especially when you consider there's a packer in the north that's coming down into Kansas and buying cattle, taking them back to kill in Nebraska regions. So that's been a little bit of a surprise to the trade. It was expecting cash to work its way lower, and we've seen 2 weeks now where we've been steady to higher in a lot of the cash trade. And that's been enough to support the cattle market as we've been pushing up into some new high territory. But do notice that we're seeing some bear spread and activity right now where the most of the strength is coming in October, December, not in the August like it was yesterday.
Meanwhile, lean hogs, they have been a big story today. Look at August lean hogs, my word. They're $3.12 higher at 53.27. What's that about? Is the low in now?
Well, I'd like to think so. We're starting to see quite a bit of short covering coming into this market. And fundamentally, I think the demand has been strong. Exports have been very strong, with China buying 8 million tons this week, taking shipments of another 12.3 million tons of pork. Just the cash markets have kind of been a laggard. If we can see the cash market firm up and move higher, we should see a decent short covering rally in that hog market.
I know there's been a lot of question if the contract lows at this point would hold or not, or when they will, and that may be one ingredient to consider. Thank you, Brian, for talking with us. Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions in Springfield, Missouri, with a look at our livestock trade at mid-session. Christina?